Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today is going to be an exciting tutorial. We're going to talk all about lights. We're going to create a master light blueprint for us to then be able to easily create children blueprints of that and create all different types of lights and control all of our lights. So we've got lights that can be just interacted with, turning them on and off with all kinds of sounds. We've got just regular lights here that can be controlled with a switch. And all of these are completely interchangeable. So with our switch, we can choose which lights to be turned on and which lights that we want to be turned off with that switch. We can choose which lights that we want to be able to interact with and which lights we don't want to be able to interact with. We've got all kinds of variables that we can set in here for the light intensities. We can change the mesh, we can change the sounds, all of that good stuff. Now, before we get into it, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you so much for all of your amazing support. I really, really appreciate it. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, leave a comment if you can. It really helps out so much. I really appreciate it. And if you want to check out how to get access to all of the project files, get access to these meshes and the assets that I'm using here, then you can check out my Patreon below. I will be giving out some of the basic meshes here completely for free. And then some of the nicer textured meshes, I'm going to include those in the assets that I give out monthly to my $5 and up patrons. So if you want to check out how to get access to that, I've got all the links down below for that. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so just to go over a few different things before we get into everything here. I've got a variety of different meshes here with some different types of lights that we can use. I've got a light switch that will get set up here. And I want to just kind of briefly talk a little bit about materials because that's going to be kind of an important thing with our lights here. Because what we want to do, I've got this basic light here, and with the actual mesh that I created, I added two different materials here. And this is just going to make things a little bit easier for us. Now, you don't have to have a mesh with two different materials, but it is going to be a little bit more difficult to work with because we're going to need to apply an emissive material on here. And so if you just have this already split up like this, then it's going to make things easier. And what I'm talking about here is if we go into, let's see, let me just grab just like a basic white color just to place this on here. So this would just be like our regular lamp when it's not turned on. But the problem is when we go to turn this light on, we're going to want to obviously have a light in here. You know, so if we have a point light in here that's way too bright, but we'll adjust this here. Okay, let's do something kind of like this. All right, so if we get a light in there, and let's bring that way down, just so we have something like that. We see that there's a light on. This obviously doesn't look great. We're going to make this look a lot better. We see that there's a light on, but the lamp shade doesn't actually change. And in real life, it would change. It would kind of be a little bit more of a glow that you would see. Because, you know, usually a lamp shade is not going to be, or it's not going to block all the light. It's going to kind of let some light through because that's kind of the point of a lamp, right? So what we want to do is have an emissive material to kind of make it look like that light is coming through there. So let's go ahead and create one. That's a very easy material for us to make. And I like to kind of create master materials for things. I have just like a basic master material for PBR setup, just like a basic color, things like that. But we can very easily just create a master emissive material as well. So let's do that. We'll call this master emissive. And let's open that up. And really, we only need a couple of things here, or really, we only need one thing. So I'm going to hold 3 and click. That will get me a constant 3 node here, which is basically just a color. And then I'm just going to set this to be white by default. And I'm going to right click on this and convert this to a parameter. And then we'll call that base color. And then we can just plug this straight into the emissive color like this, and you can see that is already glowing. But what I like to do is be able to kind of control the intensity of this. So to do that, we can multiply this, and by default, it's going to be a value of 1. But we can change that, or we might want to change that as well. So let's create a parameter for that. I'm going to hold S and click, and then we'll get a parameter here that we can rename to emissive intensity. And then I'll set a default value of 1 there and plug that in like that. So now we've got just a default white emissive color here, but we can go in here and change this to be much brighter, or bring it down and be much lower to 0, whatever we want there. Okay, so let's go ahead and apply that and save, and that is really all that we need. So now you can see if I go to, well, let's actually create a material instance from that. So create a material instance. I'll call that mi basic lamp shade on, because that is going to represent the on state. And then I'm going to move this into my actual materials folder because it's in my master materials right now. So now if I apply this to here, then I don't know if you can actually see that it, I think you can tell the difference, but there's not a huge difference. But that is again why we have this material instance, so that we can go in here and adjust this. So we could make this much brighter. We could make it much darker if we wanted to. We could also change the color if we wanted to have, a different color. Maybe we have like a green light in there, and then we want to kind of match that color of the light. But I'll just leave it as white for right now. And maybe we will bump up the intensity to something like 4, so it looks like it is kind of shining much better. So again, the actual light here doesn't look great, but you can now see that the lampshade looks like it is kind of glowing a little bit, and that's going to look a little bit better. Okay, so if you are working with a mesh that does not have an additional material on it like this, what you can do is go into the modeling tools, and then if you go to attributes and edit materials, then you're going to get this little menu here that you can do a bunch of different things. But what you would want to do is add a material here. So click on the add button here, and then you want to change the active material to the one that you're creating here. So drop this box down to the one that you created, and then you basically just want to select whatever you want to be your new material. So let's say this base here, I wanted to create a separate material for that. So I could just highlight all of this like this. You can just hold shift to undo. Okay, so you get something like this. And then what you want to do is go down here and assign active material. So click on that. And again, you want to make sure that in active material, you're choosing the new material that you have there. And then when you hit accept, now you'll see that we have an additional material here. So obviously we don't actually want to change that there, but if that was our lampshade and we, didn't have a material for that, then I could go in here and now I have a separate material for that. Okay. But all of the meshes that I've created here are already set up with an additional material like this, so we don't need to worry about that. All right, so I'm just going to remove that, just go back a few steps, and we should be good to go for that. Now, the other thing that I want to mention just really briefly is our first-person character setup. So I've already shown how to set up our first-person character. If you don't know how to do this, there's a link below for setting up your basic first-person character. And then also our interaction event here that we set up for using our interface and our line trace. It's just a very basic interaction event where we're running a line trace, checking if that hit actor has the interface on it, and then if it does, then we send out that event. So this is a very basic interact event. You could really You could use this with any character, any interaction that you have. This is just the way that I've set it up. And if you don't know how to do this, again, link is below for setting that up. Okay, so I think we are ready to go ahead and start creating our blueprint now. So I'm going to go to my blueprints folder, and I'm going to do a new blueprint, which will be an actor, and I'm going to call this BP Light Master. And the reason that I want to make kind of a master blueprint for this is I want to put some events and functions and just kind of basic functionality into this blueprint, and then I can create child blueprints of this to create different types of lights. So I might have a street light, I might have an overhead light, I might have some lamps, things like that. But it'll be nice and convenient to just have one single blueprint that we can kind of work from that has all of our basic functionality here. Since this is going to be a blueprint that we want to actually interact with, I'm going to add our interface by going to class settings, and under implemented interfaces, we're going to type BPI interact or whatever your interface here is. And then we get access to our interact events. Now, just disregard this player has key. This is just another system that I'm working on, just another function that I have built into my interface, but all we need is the interact here. And let's go to our event graph. I'm going to go ahead and delete these things here. And let's go ahead and add some components in here. So we want a static mesh. Okay. That will be the mesh for our lamp or our light. But I would like to have the ability to change that because, again, this is just our master blueprint. So we want to be able to change things very easily. So I'm going to go into variables and create a new variable. I'm just going to call it light mesh. And that will be a static mesh. And then I'll set this to be public. And what we want to do is give ourselves the ability to change this mesh. So let's go to the construction script. The construction script will allow us to run events before we begin play. So we can get our static mesh here, and we can set static mesh using this function, and we'll set that to our light mesh. Okay, now you could leave this empty if you wanted to, or you could set a default. You could really set anything in here. I mean, you could just set like a cube. But since I already have some of these meshes, I'm going to just grab our basic lamp and I will put that in there like so. Okay. And let's also, while I'm thinking about it, let's go ahead and create a material. So we have a material for our lampshade to be on, but I need to have one for it to be off as well. So I'm just going to duplicate this and just call this mi basic lamp shade off. And now since this is going to be off, I want to set the emissive intensity to be 0. And then, yeah, that'll be fine. Okay, so now what we can do, maybe we also set that in the actual mesh. We'll set the default material on there as the off one. Okay, so we have that. Okay, so now if we go to our viewport, you can actually see that we have our lamp in here. And let's go ahead and add some light as well. So I'm going to add a point light. And I'm going to rename this to be main light. And I'll just drag this up. Now, it's kind of hard to see what's going on in here, so I kind of like to go into my level. Let's actually go into our little room here where it's nice and dark. And let's go ahead and drag our blueprint out so that we can see what it's looking like here. Okay, so let's just drag it right there. All right, now, as you can see, we have a light, but this doesn't look very realistic. Let's actually separate this so that we can see kind of what we've got going on here. And again, we want to think about this in terms of being as flexible as possible. since this is just our master light blueprint, we want to have as many options as we can. Now, I'm not going to go through and change everything like this, but what I probably would do is I might put a couple of different lights in here, because you might not always want it to be a point light. You might want something to use a spotlight or something to use a rect light or things like that. You could add multiple ones in here, and then through the construction script, you could have you could create a variable to choose which one you want to use, things like that. That might be a good option to keep things as flexible as possible. But to make things just be a little bit easier for us and to save time, I'm just going to use one light here. I will actually add a second one for an ambient light. So I'm going to just duplicate this, and I'm going to call this ambient light. And the reason I want to do this is you can probably already see here, we've got the light kind of shooting out of the top and the bottom here, but because we're casting a shadow here, it's not looking very realistic. Even if we turn the emissive lampshade on, you still would need like a little bit more light around here. And so that's what my ambient light is going to do. And to kind of get that effect, I'm going to turn the shadows off. So we'll do something like that. And then the light values are here. The light values here are not correct, like the intensity and things like that. But again, that's not super important because we can change that. What I will do is change the intensity units to be candelas, just to make things a little bit easier. And then what we could do is go back to our construction script, and we could give ourselves an option to set the intensities of these. So let's get our main lights, and let's do set intensity. Okay. And now when I compile, that's going to set the intensity to 0 here. But what we want to do is create a variable that we can adjust that. So let's drag out of here, promote this to a variable, and we'll call this main light intensity. And then when I compile, I can set a default value for this. So maybe we go with something like 2 for our default. And then let's also do the same thing for our ambient lights. So set intensity. Okay, and then we'll drag out of here, promote that to a variable. That will be our ambient light intensity. And compile, and then we'll set the default value to maybe something like 0.5 or maybe 1. We'll do half of that. Okay. So we also want to set these to be public. Okay, so now if we look over here, if we're clicked on our blueprint, we now have the options to change these. So I can increase the main light intensity, the ambient light. We can change our light mesh here, all of that good stuff. Now, you can keep going here. You could do things like attenuation radius. So maybe if you want to give yourself an option to change the attenuation radius for this, you could set attenuation radius, do something like this, drag out of this, promote it to a variable. Again, do the same thing here. Again, I'm not going to do all that here because it's just kind of time consuming. But it would be a good idea to do that and just to give yourself a bunch of different options here. Okay, so I think that is good for now. Let's also maybe adjust, let's see, our main light here. Let's adjust the source radius, because you see how sharp these shadows are. If we change the source radius, if we increase this, then it's going to soften those shadows. I'm going to try something like 25. Maybe that's actually a little big. Let's try maybe 15 or so. You might just have to kind of play around with this a little bit. Again, that's another variable that you could create if you wanted to give yourself the option to change that. Okay, so for right now, I think that is good. Let's also grab both of our lights and kind of attach them to the static mesh here. That way, if we go to actually like change the scale of the static mesh or something like that, then it'll change the location and everything along with our lights and keep everything consistent. Okay, let's dock this back up here for now. And let's kind of continue on with our construction script here, because I want to think about one more thing that I want to give ourselves the option to choose here. And we're going to need a variable either way to tell if our light is on or not. So I'm going to create a variable just called light on, and that will just be a Boolean. Set that to be public. And then what we want to do here is basically create a branch here. After we change our static mesh, let's get our light on. And I'm going to do a branch. And I'm going to set light on to be true by default. You could do this either way. This doesn't really matter, but I kind of like when I drag the light out, I want to just have the light be on so that I can see what's going on. But you could have this off and just turn it off, or turn it on and off, however you want. Okay, so what we want to do is I want to be able to change this variable in here. And when I set this to be off, then I want those lights to actually go off. So we can basically just copy and paste this, duplicate here, so that when light on is false, meaning we turn that off, we will set the intensity to be 0. So I'm just going to delete those, and now those will just be 0. And when that is true, we'll set the lights, the intensity to be our default values that we set here. Okay. Now, the other thing that we need to do is we need to set the materials here, because we now have the option to turn our light on and off. So I can do that. Okay. But I still need to change the actual material. And so the way that we can do that is maybe just give ourselves a little bit more space here. Let's get the static mesh, and we can do set material. And so now we want to change this material to be whatever the material is going to be for when the light is on. And we created that basic lampshade on material. So I'm going to set that there. And then we'll continue on. And then we want to do the same thing here when this is off. So on false, move this down a little bit. Okay, then that will be the lampshade off. Okay. And you might even want to comment on this. So this is setting light on. And this will be setting light off. And then you could even go more in detail, describing, hey, we're setting the intensity of the main light, setting the intensity of the ambient light, and so on. Okay, and I'm just going to change these to be a different color. Maybe we'll go with like green and red. By the way, this is a free plugin called Auto Size Comments that allows me to do this. I can make a video on setting up some presets like this if you guys want to see. Highly recommend that plugin, though. It's very nice to work with. Okay, now the other thing that's very important here is for our static mesh, which we are setting here, we need to take a look at the actual mesh. You can see it's backwards here. Let's open this up and let's look at the materials that we have here. So the way these materials are arranged, this is basically material 0. Think about like the different slots that we have here. If we go back here, we have, or I guess they call them element index. So the element index is basically these slots. And so element index 0 is this first slot. The second one is element, oh, it actually says right here. That would have been way easier to just show you that. So we have element 0, element 1. So we actually want to change element 1. So be sure that you go in here and set that to whatever your element is. Now yours may be backwards. You may have multiple materials. Maybe you have 3 or 4 different materials. So you might need to change like element 4 or 3 or something like that. So whatever you have, make sure that that is set up correctly as well. Okay, so now if we got everything in our construction script set up, we should be able to go in here. That all looks good. If I turn my lamp off, then it goes off. The material goes to the off material. If I turn it on, changes the material to the on material and turns the, or sets the visibility or the intensity to the correct values. We can again go in and change the intensity here. I can turn it off and on, those will stay, and that is all good. Okay, so now let's actually create some functionality for this. So we already have our interact event here, so I'm gonna go ahead and double click that and get our interact here. And what we want to do is basically I'm gonna create a custom event. Okay, and I'm just gonna call this toggle light. Now you could create 2 different events here. You could have a turn light on, turn light off, something like that. But I'm just going to keep it in one event just to make it a little bit easier. And then we'll just use a branch depending on our light on here to determine which way we're going to go. So we'll get a branch. And we also want to, on our event interact, we want to actually call this toggle light. So toggle lights, just so I don't forget to do that in the future. And so what we want to do here is when we interact with it, if the light is on, the first thing that we want to do is set it to be off, because we're interacting with it. If it's on, then we're going to turn it off. So we need to tell our blueprint that we're setting that to be off. Then I'm going to play a sound, because I might have like if it's like a lamp or like a little desk lamp that has a pull chain or something like that on it, then I'll want to be able to play a sound there. So from here, I'll just do play sound at location. And for our location, I'm just going to get the actor location. Okay. And so that's just going to play the sound at our actual blueprint's location here. For our sound, I'm going to drag out and promote this to a variable. And we'll call this light off sound. And I'm going to leave this empty by default, because there are some lights that I create that I might not actually want there to be a sound when it's turned on and off, like a street lamp or something like that. So this will, if we change this to a public variable, then I can just, again, give myself the option in here to set that sound here. So since this is our turn off event on top here, we basically want to do the exact same thing that we did here. So I can actually just copy this. So I'm just going to copy all of this. We can even just copy this comment as well, because we're doing all the same thing. And we will just plug this up. Okay, and then I will just drag my comment to include all of this. Okay, and then we're going to just do the opposite on the bottom here. So we're going to set light. I'm just going to duplicate that with Control D. We're going to set that to be true. And then I'm going to just copy all of this and paste. We also need to play a sound. So these two right here can be the exact same. And then I will create a new variable for the sound here, because we want to have a different sound, because this will be our turn off, or turn on sound. So promote that to a variable. light on sounds, make it public. Okay, and now if we compile and save, we can go ahead and test this out. All right, so we've got our lamp here, and we can leave everything like this. Okay, now for our sounds here, I have some different sounds that I've gotten here. I've got this lamp click on, lamp click off, and I've created cues out of all of these sounds. So just right click, create cue. And then when you do that, if you want the sound to actually play at the location correctly, you need to change the attenuation settings. So you can either go in and override the attenuation and set it to whatever you want, or I just created a single attenuation setting. Here's my settings here. It's just kind of very generic. You can copy these if you want. The inner radius is 250, the fall off distance is 600, but this will just allow me to set an attenuation for all of these, and then it will actually sound like the sound is coming from the actor location here. If you don't have that attenuation, then you won't actually get that, so be sure that you do that if you want that. Okay, so let's go ahead and set our click on, light on, and off to off. Okay, and then if we go in and play, now you can see that that is working perfect. Okay. Now, there's one other thing that I want to do here. You don't have to do this, but I want to give myself the option to disable interaction. You can do this a lot of different ways. Some people do this on their actual interaction event. I'm just going to do it in the blueprint here. I'm going to create a new variable called disable interaction, and I'm going to make that public. And then I'm going to drag this out, and we're just going to do a simple branch here. So if disable interaction is false, then we will be able to basically move forward and play this event. But if disable interaction is true, then nothing is going to happen. And the reason that I'm doing that is because, again, we're going to have multiple lights here, like the street lamp. And this might not be a lamp that I want to, or a light that I want to be able to go up and actually interact with and turn it on and off, right? So, for example, with this one, if I wanted to disable interaction, then I can just click that. And now when I go in here, if I click E, nothing is going to happen. Okay? Now, another thing that we could do, that we are going to do in future episodes, is to give ourselves a little bit of a feedback by having some interaction text that comes up that can tell us different things like turn the light on, turn the light off. Maybe if we have disable interaction enabled, we could press E to interact, and then we can have like a message that pops up that says, hey, this object is not interactable, or can't interact with it at this time, or something like that. So just giving ourselves more options like that is never a bad idea. Again, we'll go over how to do that in the future, but for right now, I just want to focus on creating these, or this light blueprint for all of your lights. Okay, so now let's actually create some different lights in here. So let's do the street lamp here. So the way that we want to do this, now that we have our master blueprint, I can go into blueprints. To try and keep things a little organized here, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call this example assets. And then I'm going to create a new blueprint. And instead of choosing actor here, we're now going to choose our light master. Select that. And then we can give this a name. So something like BP street lamp. Okay, now because that is a child of BP Lightmaster, if I drag this out, you'll see that we have that exact blueprint that we created. But because we gave ourselves all of these different options, I don't really even need to open this. because I can just get this mesh here. So I can grab this and I can go in here and set that. And now we've just changed our static mesh here. Now, the other thing is the light is not in the correct location. So let's actually give ourselves a way to kind of change that. We could do that in the construction script. And we could do that really kind of before all of this. Okay, so let's get our main light and let's set location. We're gonna do relative location. And just one kind of quick thing to note here, the reason I'm using relative location, this always confused me a lot of times. I still get confused over this or just kind of forget. But if you look in the viewport here, by default, most of the, I think pretty much always, your components are going to be using relative location by default. And you can confirm that by looking over here in the location and dropping this box down. And you can see that we are using relative location. Okay, so we want to set the relative location, and that's going to set the relative location based on whatever its parent is, essentially. So the parent here is the static mesh. If we were going to set the location of the static mesh, then we're setting it to the relative location of the entire blueprint and so on like that. Now for the new location, we can just drag out and we can promote this to a variable. So this will be main light location. And by default, I want to actually set it to where we had it before, which was where the ambient light is. So I'm going to just copy this. Really, all we need to copy here is the 47. Let's see. So we will just set this to be 47. Agent 47. I've been playing a lot of Hitman lately, so that is on my mind. Okay. Now you don't have to set that. You could just leave it at 0 and then you could just change it every time, but I'm just going to set it to that since that's what it is for my regular lamp. And now I also want to do the ambient light. So we'll do the same thing here. Set relative location. And then we'll need another variable here. I'm just going to duplicate this one because it's going to be the same location, but we're going to call it ambient light location. And then don't forget to make these public. This should be 47. Yep. So now we use that as our location. Now, when we go in here, we now have the location that we can change here. So I could move this up to kind of like that. And then for my ambient light, maybe move that up as well, somewhere around there. That looks a little bit better. And then again, so since this is an object that we probably wouldn't want to just be able to walk up to and turn on and off, because right now I can just walk up and turn that on and off. We can set the interaction to disable, and then we also don't need a light off and on sound. So now we just have just this regular light. Now you may be asking yourself, why do that? Because we could just, you know, basically add in a point light, set it to this location here, just get that, set it to the location, drag it up like that, change our material, and then we basically have done the same thing, right? And we have done the same thing, but this gives us way more flexibility and so many more options and things that we can do with this. And I'll give you an example here, because we're going to create a light switch to control all of these different lights. But before I do that, there's one more thing that I want to do in my Light Master blueprint. And this, again, is a totally optional thing, but I want to just talk a little bit about event dispatchers and how I use them, because I get this question a lot. And the question is often, if you're in a level here and let's say that you have some kind of a puzzle with a light that, like, once the light is turned on, then you want to do something else in the level and you want to trigger something else. Maybe, like, I don't know, this is kind of a weird example, but if you had a light and once it's turned on, you wanted to have door open or something. So the way that I like to do that is using event dispatchers. And it's kind of, again, kind of a neat thing that we can do by creating a master blueprint like this. We can create an event dispatcher in our base here that we can then use in any of those other ones. So under event dispatchers here, I'm going to create, and I'm going to call this, let's say, state changed. So essentially what I want to know is whenever we change the state of our light, if we're turning it on or off, I want to be able to send out a message essentially that is telling us that we're doing that. So I'm going to do that right here. And what I can do with an event dispatcher is just drag it out like this, and then we have some different options. I want to call it here, and we can place it in between these two. Okay. And so now whenever this event is triggered, it's going to also trigger our event dispatcher that is going to send out a message. It's sending it out into the Unreal space, and it's just waiting for something to happen. And what we can do at this point is we could now say, let's go in here, and I don't have a door in the level, but let's just say that we wanted to add another light in here. This doesn't really make any sense, but just to show you how this works, basically. So I'm going to set the visibility to be off. And what I want to do is say when I interact with this, I want to turn this light on. So think about this like you're interacting with a puzzle, or this could be anything, and then once that puzzle is finished, or once some event happens, in our case, once we toggle the light here, we're sending out a message to do something else. And we can use our level blueprint for a lot of this. So if I open my level blueprint here, then I can delete these things, and as long as I have my actor selected like this, in my level blueprint, I can right click and I can type that event dispatcher that we created. So EVD, you see here, then we get state changed, and we get this event. So now, whenever this event is run, this event is going to run as well. And the great thing about the level blueprint is we can very easily get references to things, basically anything that's in our level here. So I could get a reference to this light by clicking on it, going back to my level blueprint, right click, and then you'll see create reference to point light 5. And again, that could be anything here. And then from this, I can do anything I want to that light. So I can say set visibility of the point light to be new visible, or new visibility. So now that light is not visible. When I interact, oh, we set disable interaction, didn't we? Let's turn that back on. Okay, so now when we interact with this, then it's also going to send that event dispatcher to our level blueprint, and whatever we have attached to that is going to run an event or change something on there. So I'm just going to delete this for now because I don't actually want that to happen. And then I'll go back here and just delete that. All right, but now that, again, that event dispatcher is in all of these, right? So if I click on this one, if I go to my level blueprint, I can type EVD, state changed, and you can see that it is getting the exact reference to that BP street lamp that we created, and then we have that event dispatcher there. So also just keep in mind that your blueprints that you create, your children blueprints that you create from your light master, you can still edit those and change things around. So like if we browse to this and open this up, sometimes it will show up like this. You just need to click on Open Full Blueprint in Editor here. And now this can be a little confusing because if you're not used to using children blueprints and have parent classes and things like that, then you might open this up and you think like, oh wait, there's nothing actually in here, but I thought that we were doing all of this. Well, we are doing all of this. All of these events, everything is in this blueprint. It's just being called or used from the parent class. So we could change things in here, and I'll show you an example of how we can do this, but you just need to kind of be careful here because like we can call all of these events here. Like I could call toggle light, events toggle light, but now I'm essentially overriding what we're doing with toggle light in our specific BP street lamp blueprint. And if we just played it like this, nothing is going to happen because our toggle light doesn't have anything here. Okay. Now, let me just show you an example because I think this will be easier. Let's create another blueprint for this desk lamp. And we're going to change some things in here to where I have a little pull chain. So I want to basically move that when we interact with it. So let's create another blueprint of the light master. And I'm going to call this BP desk lamp. And now if we open this up, we can go ahead and change some things in here. So you can see these are all of my variables over here. Same thing as like if we're looking at it in this view right here. So I can go ahead and set my mesh to things that I want. So I'll go and grab our desk lamp here. Okay. And now you'll see that our light, the actual location of the light needs to change. Now again, don't forget that we're doing that in the construction script here. So if I go to try to change this, I can't move this because it's being set in the construction script. So if we actually want to change that, which I do, then we can do that right here. So I will move this down to where we get kind of like that. Maybe something like that. And then for my ambient light, let's move that down as well, kind of like that. All right, and then we can go ahead and kind of take a look at this in the level, see what it's looking like. Now you can see that my source radius is too big here. So let's go back to our lamp here and get the main light, and I'm going to set the source radius maybe to like 5. That can be quite a bit smaller, I think. And I think that that'll work better. Yeah, that looks better. Okay. Now what I also want to do is I want to add an additional component in here, which is going to be a little chain that I have here. Let me find that. It's this one right here. So I'm just going to drag this in, and let's attach that to the static mesh. And then we're going to see that that goes down there. So let's just reset the location first. And then we want it to be, if we can do this, right about there is where we really want it. So I might need to turn snapping off. Pull that up. I think that looks pretty good. I keep forgetting to change the clip distance. I promise I'm going to do that one of these days. Okay, so I think that is good. So what I want to have happen when we run our event, or when we run our toggle event, I want to like pull this down. And then basically both times when we turn it on and off, I want to pull it down and then back up. So how can we do that? Because if we go back here, again, we don't have any of those events, and I can call toggle light the event, but this event is then going to basically override everything that we're doing here, right? So there's a couple of different things that we could do. I could literally just copy and paste all of this, copy it and then paste it in here. But there's another thing that you can do when you're in a child blueprint. You can right click on your event like this, and you can do add call to parent. And now what this does, this is essentially doing all of this. And then I could run code either before or after this. So I think in our case, we'll run it before. So it's going to basically call this event, and then it's going to run our code that we're going to put here and then continue on. Now, what I want to do with the chain here is I want to basically move it down and then move it back up. So I'm going to start in our kind of start position here, which I'm going to say is going to be right about there. And what we're going to want to do is move it from, on the Z axis here, we're going to want to move it from roughly 24.2 to around there maybe. This is going to be a pretty small movement, but I'm just going to leave it in kind of the start position. And let's use a timeline for this. Okay, so I'm going to add timeline, and we'll call this chain TL. And you guys have probably seen me do this before, but if you haven't, I'll just kind of walk through what we're going to do here. We want to set the location here. So set location, let's see, relative. And because really all we're changing here is the Z location, and we really want the start and the ends to be the same. So we're going to use the timeline to change those actual locations. So the length, let's try something pretty short, like 0.25. And then for our float track, we'll call this alpha. And now our keys that I'm going to add on here, the first one that I'm going to want is, it's going to be at time 0, but I want the value to be the location on the Z-axis, so this right here. So I'm going to copy that and paste that into the value like that. And then what I want to have happen is I want the chain to move down. So we'll move to, let's say, like right there. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. Let's see. Oh, go back to my timeline. And that's going to be another key point. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to go ahead and add the value to be that. And now the time, I want the time to be like halfway in between here, because this is representing the movement of the chain. So the chain's going to go down to this location, about halfway between this, and then it's going to go back up. So let's try, well, I guess we could do exactly half. So that would be like 0.125. Oh, that's not a 5. Okay. So if we go ahead and just center this like this, and kind of zoom this out, we can see a little bit better what we're doing here. And then we need one more key at the end here, which will be at the end of our timeline. So 0.25. And then it will be the same value as this, so the starting point. Okay, so like that. Okay, and then we can do this. So now, again, this is representing movement. So we're starting at this location. We're going to move down and then move back. And if we go here, we can split this like so. And we need to plug in the location for our X and Y because we don't want to change those. We only want to change the Z. So we will just plug this directly into the Z. And then for our other locations here, I'm just going to get location, relative location, and then we can split this, and this will go like so. Okay, so this has gotten a little messy. Let's just try to organize this. These timelines are always kind of hard to organize as far as the way the graph looks here. Maybe we just do something like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and compile and test this out. Oh, let's also change our sounds here. I've got some sounds for this. I've got a lamp chain off and a lamp chain on. Okay, so let's test this out here. Okay, so that is obviously a problem. Let's see. Oh, okay, so I think I know what is going on. Yeah, so I think we actually need to run this after. So let's try and put this at the ends here. Okay. Okay, so that looks like it's working. It's really hard to tell if the chain is actually moving, though. The other thing is I need to just make sure that I actually set the initial location correctly here. And I think I'm going to slow this down because let's actually look at the time. Yeah, so actually I can see the duration here for this is 0.568. Let's see what the off is. Hopefully roughly the same. Okay, so 0.6. So let's try and actually do a timeline of 0.6. So let's change our length to be 0.6. And now I need to zoom out here and just set the time for the ends to be 0.6. And then the one in the middle will be half of that, so 0.3. The other thing I see I need to do here is do play from start, because we want to be able to play this multiple times, and so it's only playing the first time. So in order for us to be able to play multiple times, we're going to do play from start. And now I think we should be good. Okay, yeah, there we go. Now I can see it moving, and the timing looks a little bit better. And yeah, that seems to work good. Okay, so I wanted to just show that example for how you can change something like this on your child blueprints. You know, you can add things in here, you can create additional variables, you can have more components, move things like that. So I hope that is helpful. And now the last thing that I want to do is to create a light switch for all of these. Now, I've created a light switch tutorial before, and this is going to be pretty similar with one exception, that we're going to be able to actually select blueprints instead of just individual lights, and that's going to just give us more functionality. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new blueprint, and I'm going to call this, it's going to be an actor, we'll call this BP light switch. Open that up, and let's go ahead and drag our meshes in. So I've got two different meshes here. Okay, so just a cover and then the actual switch here. I'm going to parent the switch to the case there, so that now if I move the case around or change the size of the case, then everything will remain consistent. And this is going to be an actor that we want to interact with. So let's add our BPI interaction. Okay. And then let's go to our event graph. We'll delete all of this, get our interact. And we'll do kind of the same thing that we did with our lights. So I'm going to do a custom event, and I'll call this toggle switch. And then here we will call toggle switch. Okay, and now on our actual event, the first thing that I'm going to do is play a sound, just going to be a light switch sound. So we'll play sound at location. And the location will just be get actor location. And then you could create a variable for this. I'm just going to have mine be pretty much the same in everywhere, but you could, of course, create a variable if you wanted to. Let's see, I've got a light switch. So I'm just going to plug that in like so. And then we need to do a check here if the light is on or not. So let's go ahead and create a variable for light on. We'll make that public. We'll get that and run a branch. And then if our light is on and we toggle it, we want to set it to be off. And then we want to change the rotation of our actual switch here. So currently this is in the off position. So if we take a look at this, this is just 0, 0, 0. So we will get the light switch, set relative rotation, and we can just leave it at 0, 0, 0. And then on false, we want to do the opposite. So we'll set the light to be on. And then we want to set the rotation. Let's see what we need to set it at. So, okay, that's too much. Whoa. So let me just kind of play with it here and see. I think like -6 looks pretty good. So let me just reset that for now. So on the Y, we want to set to -6. Okay, so we can go ahead and test this. Let's actually just delete this guy and bring out our actual blueprint here. Okay, so as we interact, you can see it's moving back and forth. Our sound is playing. That looks good. Now we do need a way in our construction script to set this on and off. So I'll just copy these relative rotations and paste those into our construction script here. And then we'll do a branch here. So depending on the, we will either set this to be on or off as far as the rotation goes. Okay, so now lights. Oh, actually I have those backwards. Yeah, we need to reverse these. If we set light to be true, then we're going to set the rotation to be -6. If we set it to be 0, or if we set it to be off, then we're going to set it to be 0. So now, there we go. So now this should be correct. Now what we want to do is we want to be able to get a reference to whatever lights are in our level that we want to control. Okay, so what I'm going to do is create a new variable, and I'm just going to call this lights. And the type here is just going to be a generic actor, just a regular actor. We'll make it public, and I want this to be an array because we can have multiple lights in our scene that we want to control. Okay, so we can now get those, and then we'll run a for each loop. And we want to do this on both sides here, because whether we're turning it off or turning it on, we need to access that toggle light event. And then from our array elements, we can then cast to BP light master. And then from there, we can call the toggle light. Okay, so let's compile and save. And let's take a look at what we got. All right, so now in our level, I can click on our switch here. And now, as long as you make sure that you make this public, your lights here, you can create an array element, and then you can select whatever lights in the level you want. So we can then get this little dropper and choose the street lamp here. And let's make sure that we have our light on kind of synced up here. So this light is on, so we want the actual switch to be on there. Okay, so now we can go here, and now when I click this, then it's going to turn that light on and off. So now what we have a really modular system that we can do a bunch of different things with, right? And like I said, this can be used with multiple lights. So I will just very quickly create a couple of additional blueprints from our child blueprints, or from our light master for these, just to kind of show you some examples. Okay, so I have just gone through and set up a bunch of different lights here. These are all based off of our single master light blueprint that we created. Just changing a couple of different things, like we added our chain here in here. I did update some of the sounds and locations of the actual light source and things like that. But overall, it's very easy to set all of this up now. And we've got everything in a blueprint, so we can now take our light switch and control any of these that we want to. So, you know, right now I think that we are only doing the street lamp here. We're turning on and off, but we can of course turn all of these on and off. Now these, I think I haven't set the interaction on these, so we would probably want to go in and turn or disable interaction for these. We'll do it for this one as well. And then let's say that we want to also add the ability to control these lights with the switch. Okay, so now we can go in and play, and when I click this, it's going to turn all of those off. And we could even, you know, add a lamp in here as well. So maybe we add one more, control that. So now when we toggle the switch, it turns that off as well. Now you do have to kind of be careful here because, you know, again, this is a real world thing, but if I turn this off and these are still on, then when I go to turn this off, it's going to turn that on. And when I turn this back on, it's going to turn this off until we kind of go over here and fix it like that. But that is something that absolutely happens in real life. So I think it's kind of fun to actually leave that in. But yeah, I think that will pretty much do it for today, guys. I hope you found this useful. This was a fun little project to set up. We've got a lot more stuff coming. We're going to show how to do interaction text for specific events. So like if the light is on, we'll be able to say turn the light off. If it's off, we'll be able to say turn on, things like that. I've got a lot of updates to the character that I'm working on for just all kinds of stuff, health and healing yourself and all that kind of basic stuff. That'll be coming up soon. But as always, if you have any questions, just let me know. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. All right, take care, guys.